And so if you have Bibles, Ecclesiastes chapter 2. I teach on Wednesday morning, Thursday noon. That's my regular schedule for this session for Priority Living. And I was getting ready to go over yesterday morning, and our administrator was at church, and he said, what are you teaching? And I said, Ecclesiastes chapter 2. He said, it doesn't really matter what chapter. They're about all the same once you get to Ecclesiastes. And they really feel that way. So if you are new to this and new to a study, you've come at what I would think, this is me now, a really good time. We're looking at a book that's crucial to the understanding of you as a person. I am in a couple of weeks doing a little getaway for a group of guys, and one of the topics they want to talk about is discipleship, and there's enough other guys there that'll talk about it that I don't think I need to spend a ton of time on it, but I've been doing a lot of reading, and one guy suggests, talking about disciple as a follower, a learner, defining it, but says, here's what Jesus tried to put in the heart of his disciples. And that was servanthood, Jesus as a model, cultivate faith, and then, I think this is like the big motivator, an eternal perspective. That if I can start to see my life, the lives of the people around me, the world I'm in, if I can see that from Jesus' perspective and then act accordingly, now things start to fall into place. They make sense. It's not the world as I want it to be. It's God's perspective. Well, in His desire, God's desire for us to have that perspective, He gave us a guy by the name of Solomon. And we'll probably make some reference to this every week because you have to keep this in your mind. If you miss this, then the lessons are very confusing. And this is easy to remember. God allowed Solomon to experience whatever it is you think would make you happy. And then He tells you the end result of that. Ecclesiastes means the one who assembled the facts. So as you move your way through life, essentially, whatever your experience is, at least in a broad sense, Solomon can say, been there, done that. Let me tell you how that ends. Some of you are parents, still parenting, and grandparents, still grandparenting and probably parenting. And some of you are in that state of life that's kind of a weird state because you're parenting your parents and you're parenting your grandkids and you're parenting your kids. And part of that is imparting wisdom. Well, Solomon is this rich source of wisdom. Hang out with Solomon. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, he does this. Chapter 1, verse 2, verse 3, he gives you a conclusion. Sandy was in Pasadena for a few days, so I wanted a book to read, and I got the new John Grisham novel. I'm 57% of the way through it, which tells you I'm reading it on a Kindle, and I'm kind of going, all right, let's figure this out. It's Grisham, so it's mystery, a bit of a whodunit, and that's the story. I met someone last night, and I said, what are you doing? And her answer to me was, I'm writing a book. And I said, oh, wow, what kind of book? And she said, well, that's a mystery. And I didn't know if she meant, what kind of book it is a mystery, or you're not going to tell me, or it's a whodunit. There's no whodunit for Solomon. You don't have to get by the first 3 verses to get his conclusion. He tells us in verse 1 of chapter 1 who he is, though he doesn't use his name. And here's his conclusion. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does a man have for all his work, which he does under the sun? Solomon says, here's life. I've looked at it. I've lived it. Vanity. Some of your translations will say meaningless. He uses a phrase, under the sun. And that's one of the keys. There's a couple of words that I got to get defined in my mind, or I'll never get the book of Ecclesiastes. Under the sun means Solomon, as I look horizontally around the world, and I evaluate it on a worldly perspective. That's under the sun. And then he uses the word gain, or what is left. And what he means is this, and we might say it in terms of what's the net after the transaction. After I live my life, after I do these things, after I experience all there is, what's the gain? And his answer is, there's really nothing to be gained under the sun. Well, today we're going to look at chapter 2, and you can see on your outline, we've kind of used the title of one of the anthems, probably, from my generation, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, the old Stone song. And I try, and I try, and I try, but I can't get no. Now, the English may not be great, the grammar, but the idea is there. And Solomon preceded them by thousands of years. So we're just going to take a look at it, and I'll tell you up front, and it's going to be the same thing over and over and over again. This world will not produce happiness, joy, contentment, satisfaction if you're trusting it to provide that satisfaction that only comes in a right relationship with God through Christ. There's something in you that wants to be happy, wants to be satisfied, wants to be fulfilled. You were created to be, but you were created to be fulfilled in a right relationship with God through Christ. So Solomon takes a run at it, and he starts with pleasure, verse 1 and 2. I use the term, he goes on a pleasure hunt. He said to myself, come on now, I'll test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. I said of laughter, it was madness. And of pleasure, what does it accomplish? He said, I decided that I'd try to find fulfillment in fun, is the word I would use. I'll get, in my day, Johnny Carson, or now I'll get Jimmy Fallon, or I'll get Chris Rock, or whoever Brian Reagan, whoever your person is, whatever that show is, and I'll have fun. I'm going to find fulfillment in fun. I'm just going to do fun. When I came to town, and my pursuit was like Solomon, minus the wisdom and minus the money. But I became, if you don't have a lot of dough, you become an expert at something called the happy hour. And I worked in Tempe, and there was a Black Angus on Broadway and about Priest that had the best happy hour that I could find in town. They had incredible food, and they had call drinks, meaning you didn't get a bourbon and water, or whiskey and water. You got Johnny Walker Red and water for 75 cents. And so this became like a magnet for me every day around 3 o'clock. And there was a lady who was a server who was old enough that you weren't trying to hit on her, but she was a pro. And she would come by every time I was in there, and she'd say, Tom, we're going to have happy hour over pretty fast. You want an order? So I'd say, bring me 2, bring me 3, bring me, not a lot of water, but a lot of ice. She knew how to make it. And so here's what I discovered, is that place was filled with people for happy hour, and rarely, almost never, were we more happy at the end of the hour than we were at the beginning. It seemed like and I'm going to be brutally honest, it seems like my loneliness, my yearning, whatever it was deeper at the end of that. The jokes were funnier, but the hurt was greater. And that's what Solomon says. Solomon says, I could have saved you a lot of time. That isn't going to work. And so he tried a new house. Verse 3, explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how I took hold of the folly until I could see what was good there was in the sons of men under the heaven. And I, verse 4, enlarged my works. I built a house for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. Solomon built a house. Many of you in here have done that, are doing that. Solomon built a temple. Remember that? It took him 7 years to build the temple. To me, this seems important. It took him 7 years to build the temple. It took him 14 years to build his house. It was a big house. Now, there's nothing wrong with a house. I feel like I'm constantly backpedaling in this discussion. He's not saying don't build a house, but he's saying you got to understand, if you're building that house to be happy, it's not going to make you happy. I am way past the stage in life where we help friends move. But remember that stage where it was like every weekend somebody that you hung out with was moving. And almost every time we had the same experience. It was Solomon-esque in the sense that we would move everything in, and then the people that we were moving would bring in pizza and soda or beer or whatever it was, and we'd sit around, and the people who were moving into the house would almost every time say, this is all the house I'm ever going to need. I'm not going to need any more than this. This is the greatest house. All hyperbole. So many of my friends are downsizing. And the question, it seems to me, is why did I upsize? Well, we had kids. Well, here's a revolutionary thought. You can put 2 in a bedroom. They don't need their own room. In fact, they're going to be more selfish, more socially unadjusted, wrong word, if they have their own room than if they're sharing a room. They're going to learn some social skills of negotiation. Solomon says, listen, you got this house, and then you get this house, and then you get this house, and you're asking that house to make you happy, and it won't. I'm talking to Sandy the other day, and we're driving down, and there's a billboard that says Powerball $403 million. I never bought a Powerball ticket. I don't know how to buy one. I assume you just, judging from the fact that a lot of people do it, I'm guessing I could figure it out. Like, give me a Powerball ticket. But I said to Sandy, if you won the Powerball, what would you do? And she said, well, I'm not going to win the Powerball. She said, what my dad said, I'm not going to buy a ticket. And I said, well, what if you won, what would you do? And she said, I might buy a condo in Coronado because I know how big that is to you. But other than that, I don't think I'd do much different. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm sure that would change things. But the fact she mentioned a condo in Coronado, I found myself saying, if I had that, do you think that would make me happy? And then if I had a condo in Coronado, it'd be on the 3rd floor, but there's all those floors over me. So there's no end to that. It isn't going to end. I know I told you the story of a friend of mine who was going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I've never been, so I don't know anything about it. I guess it's beautiful. And he phoned up and screened and found the realtor and said, check me out. No, I'm legitimate. Here's the stuff you need. Tell me what you need, because if I see something, I'm going to buy it. And I want to move quickly, and let's get it done. So this is him telling the story, short version. Walk into the first house, absolutely beautiful. And the realtor says, if you like it, you need to move kind of quickly. I've got a motivated seller. They're going through a divorce. Going to the second house, same story. Motivated seller going through a divorce. Third house, he said, we walk in. I don't know if you ever watch House Hunters, but if you watch House Hunters, you can recreate it. They walk in the front door and go, oh, wow, $1 million view. Can you imagine waking up to that every morning? It's the same discussion every time. And he said, we walked in, and this room is kind of a circular, floor-to-ceiling glass, looking at whatever the big mountain is. He said, absolutely breathtaking. And the guy said, if you're interested, okay, better hurry up. I got a motivated seller. They're going through a divorce. And he said, and this became the illustration, he said, I said to the realtor, is there something in the water up here? Or what? What's motivated seller going through a divorce? And the realtor said, no. He said, here's what happens. People typically have a lot of resources, meaning dough, or they wouldn't be here. And they come here and they buy a house, and the house they're buying is bought to make them happy. And once they move in, they realize they're moving all their problems in with them, meaning themselves. So if you're an AA guy or gal, it's the geographical cure. I'm unhappy in Dayton. I'll move to Cleveland. I mean, that makes me laugh to say it. I'm in Cleveland. I'll get to Chicago. If I'm in Chicago, I'll get to Phoenix. It'll make me happy. That's what Phoenix. When I first got here, there was a lot of that in Phoenix, 75. There were a lot of people moving in, and almost all were unhappy people who thought everything was going to get better here. And what Solomon is saying is, I've been to Jackson Hole, and that's not going to solve your problem. He's not saying you're a bad man, you're a bad woman if you want a house. He's not saying that. He's just saying, don't ask that house to do what only Jesus can do. So then Solomon goes, well, maybe I'm too selfish. I'm going to give back to the community. So I made gardens, verse 5, and parks, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees, and I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate the forest of growing trees. He said, I'm going to do all these public works. I'm in this desert. I'm going to make it rich and vibrant. I'm going to give back. I'm going to do social work, good work, charity work. You say, well, that didn't make me happy. And so maybe a little bit inward. He says in verse 7, I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves. Also, I possessed flocks and herds larger than anyone who preceded me in Jerusalem. Also, I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings in Providence, and I provided for myself male and female singers and pleasures of men and many concubines. He said, I'm going to try to satisfy myself through the accumulation of stuff and the arts and the music Let me read you verse 6, 7, and 8 from the Message. It's a paraphrase, Eugene Peterson. I made pools of water to irrigate the groves of trees. I bought slaves, male, female, who had children, giving me even more slaves. Then I inquired large herds and flocks, larger than anybody before me. And I piled up silver and gold and loot from kings and kingdoms. And I gathered a chorus of singers to entertain me with song and the most exquisite of all pleasures, voluptuous maidens for my bed. Solomon said, I decided now, I'm going to pursue big bucks, pleasure, arts. I'm going to get musicians. I don't know who yours would be. Last Sunday at 3 o'clock, I don't know where you were, I was at the Chandler Performing Arts Center at 3 o'clock for the Glenn Miller Orchestra. My birthday's in November, and last November, my daughters, with enough foresight, said, hey, what's something Dad really enjoy? Well, he's going to enjoy Glenn Miller. And so, this is way more history than you want, but I feel compelled to give it to you. After Glenn Miller died, the family formed the Glenn Miller Orchestra. And all of the arrangements of that band that was organized in 1956, the band still exists, obviously different musicians. The first date I ever had in my life, my mom took me to see the Glenn Miller Orchestra and Phyllis Diller. Okay? So we walked in there the other day, and it was like the same bandstands were up there. And they came out, and they sat down, and it was 17-piece with a piano in all the different saxes. I'm not sophisticated enough to know all the difference. And the different trumpets, and every arrangement, here you go, sounded like the records. And I'm waiting. And everybody in there is waiting for one song. Everybody's waiting for In the Mood. And when they got to that, I mean, there's a bunch of old people. I sat down and I said to my daughter, and I can't hear, and I said, look at how old these people are. And she said, Dad, shh. And I said, I'll bet you $5 we don't get through this without calling an ambulance. She said, everybody can hear you. I said, there's no way they can hear me. I can't hear myself. We can't hear. And it was like, for 2 hours, it was like you were back in time. I couldn't see Glenn Miller, but I could see Jimmy Stewart leading the band. And June Allison dancing. But when it was over. And it transported. There were I counted 6 guys who wore their army uniforms. It was absolutely the coolest thing. But it didn't make me happy. And what Solomon said is, I'm going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And it's not culture. One of the things I can't stand is somebody that moves out from New York or Chicago or Boston and said, I moved out here, but you people don't have any culture out here. And I want to go, we got even less now that you're here. Go back. Go back there. Go back to the east, wherever you're from. Okay? But the classiest, most cultured people, maybe of all time, were in Nazi Germany, drinking the finest of brandies and wine, and then executing Jews systematically all day. There's nothing wrong with music. It's great. He mentioned sex. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great. But it's only going to take you so far. And now he starts to camp on some of the futility of it all. He says in verse 11, a little bit of a summary. He said, "Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind. There's no profit under the sun." There's that conclusion, the thus. I thought about it all. I thought about the striving for pleasure, the striving for business. I thought about the political success. I thought about the business success. I thought about the arts. I thought about all these things. And at the end of the day, there's nothing left. Here you go. Do you get the phrase? Under the sun. Horizontally. He was a man who had amassed great wisdom. Verse 12, "I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what will a man do who will come after the king except what has already been done? I saw wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness." He said, the more I knew, and he was a wise man. We're told in 1 Kings 10:1, the Queen of Sheba came to visit him and was astounded at his wisdom. And he said, here's something really weird. The more wisdom I got, so let's define wisdom in kind of a utilitarian way. The ability to connect the dots, the ability to see life as it really is. The wiser I got, the more I realized that life apart from God is meaningless. I can't take it with me. Verse 18, another conclusion. "Thus I hated all the fruit of my labor, for which I labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor, for which I've labored by acting wisely under the sun. This is foolish." He said, here you go. Let's say I acquire and accumulate and preserve. When it's done, I'm leaving it, and I don't know what's going to come after me. Every once in a while, I'll watch a show on PBS, and I'll go, this is really whacked out. A lot of it's really good, by the way. I'm not a PBS basher. A lot of it's really good. But it'll be some goofy show, and then it'll say, sponsored by the Ford Foundation. I'm thinking, Ford would not be a happy dude if he knew he was funding this thing. Think about leaving it. Sandy and I, we've been married, it'll be 5 years this May. Before we got married, we did not do premarital counseling, which I probably was a little bit of, I don't think I need this, but fundamentally probably should have done it. But we accidentally got premarital counseling. We went in to write our will and deal with our estate. Because we had a guy that was really good. And he asked a lot of really hard questions. So, Sandy, you have a daughter. What kind of relationship do you have with her? What kind of relationship will she have with Tom? In the event of your demise, which is a euphemism, not in the event of it, it's coming. How do you want to disperse that? Do you want to treat her like you treat Sarah and Haley? Do you want to take what you have, which is not a ton, but it's a lot? Do you want to leave it to them and let it go from there? And I've always had kind of this fundamental conviction, assuming now, I'm getting up there. My girls are mid-30s. If when I die, my girls are 45, if they need my money, then the last thing I probably ought to give them is my money. Because there's some reason by 45 you don't have this figured out. But it doesn't matter. You're going to leave it to them. And just what he's saying, you got no idea. At the end of the day, that's it. At the end of the day, you're going to sit down and everything you have is going to stay. Every dime, every house, every asset, every Mickey Mantle baseball card, every car, every trophy. It's interesting. I keep mentioning to you, Sue Wright is very sick, and she's had a stroke, and the rehab on that, as many of you know, is really hard. And if you're strong-willed, maybe, but you gotta be strong. And Sue doesn't want him. Since Larry died, when you see Sue, you'll say, "Sue, how you doing?" And she'll go, "I just want to go be with Larry." And I go and I visit her, and she's in bed, and the conversation inevitably is about faith and family and friends. It's inevitably about that. So if that's where it's going to end up, Solomon's saying, understand that. Know that. The estate that you amass isn't going to satisfy you. Here you go. Listen to these wise, rich men. W.H. Vanderbilt said, "The care of $200 million is enough to kill anyone. There's no pleasure in it." John Jacob Astor, "I'm the most miserable man on earth." John D. Rockefeller, "I have made many millions, but they have brought me no happiness." Andrew Carnegie, "Millionaire," this is a great line. "Millionaires seldom smile." That gets with my old, you never see a bumper sticker on a Mercedes. I don't know what that means. You just never do. Henry Ford, "I was happier when doing a mechanic's job." Those are 5 great quotes. I had 2 guys yesterday email me and say, "Will you send me a copy of those quotes?" And I emailed back and said, "I don't know how to do that. I'll give you a hard copy next week." Okay? But here's what I know. When you hear those quotes, here's what you think. I'm the exception. I'll bet I could care for $200 million. I don't know what you need, guys. You got Solomon and Vanderbilt and Astor and Rockefeller and Ford and Carnegie, and they're all telling you the same thing. Human nature is such that says, if I have that, I'll be happy. I want to say 10 or 15 years ago, Bill O'Reilly had kind of popped on the scene, and the O'Reilly factor was just kicking off, and now it's been number 1 in cable for 21, whatever the number is. So he did what you do when you burst on the scene. He wrote a book, and somebody thought I needed to read the book, so they gave me a copy of the book. And I scanned it, and he came from humble means. He was a high school teacher, I think Harvard, so he was educated. In this book, in the middle of it, I had to go to page 172 to find a quote. He wrote this, short paragraph. "Here's something that really surprises me. The more stuff I have, the more stuff I want. And so I looked around and saw that everyone else was the same. It was not until I had a few things that I noticed how this works. The material stuff is addicting. I'm starting to feel better." And the same thing happened to me last year. I honestly do, I'm there. I'm getting close. And I watch the golf, it's the dumbest thing in the world. I watch the Golf Channel, and I'm going, you know what? I need a new driver. Okay? Now understand, I've played 12 holes in 5 years. Okay? So equipment's probably not going to be my problem. I'm guessing I got bigger problems than that. But if I just get that driver, here's the new golf ball everybody's playing. It gets me 5 more yards. There was and I'm going to mess this up. I should have bought the magazine. I didn't. I was in a hurry. But it was a golf magazine, Golf Digest, something golf. And this was the lead story. Change your game in 8 seconds. All right. I've been at golf a while. You're not going to change it in 8 seconds. You're not going to change anything in 8 seconds other than a heart that moves from stone to flesh. You're not going to change anything in 8 seconds. Give me that house. I still go to Barnes & Noble because I love the vibe of a bookstore. And I hang out, and the magazine racks are as big as this side of the room. And they're endless. This house, this architecture, this golf, this car, this beauty, get this tucked and that pulled and this moved around. And what Solomon is saying is, it isn't going to happen. Solomon said, you're not going to find it. Solomon says it and says it. Let me remind you, not as a jealous loser who never got there, but a guy who's at the top of his game. A guy who said, listen, I'm all for it. Knock yourself out, buddy. Build the house, get the car, get the job, get the girl, get the other girl. I love this statistically. I think this is one of those great statistics because you don't have to make it up. It's the Bureau of Census. Second marriages fail at a higher rate than first marriages. Third marriages, higher than second. Fourth, higher than third. Fifth, higher than fourth. Sixth, higher than fifth. And then you're Larry King after that. I don't know what you do after that. My point is, it fleshes out, no pun intended, it fleshes out what we're saying. If I get rid of her, I'll get a new her. I go through this with guys all the time. The 2017 models are out, guys, and they look really good. But you're not going to get much for your trade-in. And it's going to cost you a lot. And when you get it home, you're going to take it for a spin, and you're going to go to Panera to get a salad, and they're going to ding that door, and all of life starts all over again. And the end of this, so let me give you the punchline. The end of this is not despair and hopelessness. The end of this is, even in this world, I can find meaning and purpose, not in a person, place, or thing, other than Jesus. That's the only thing that's going to satisfy me. All right? Next week, more of the same, but it'll feel better. Father, thank you for that awesome truth. We know it. We know it. We're looking at it and say, we know that's true. God, drill it deep into our heart and our mind. Help us see the world as you see it, and then live our life accordingly. We pray that to you in Christ's name. Amen.